Welcome to Them Frames That Make Us, a photography podcast where photographers share 3 images that have shaped both their professional and personal journeys in the craft. First up, I'm joined by Jon McCormack. Jon is a wildlife, nature and documentary photographer with over 20 years of experience in the craft. He's known for his very unique perspectives and angles for his subjects that help stop people scrolling, get people talking and advance the conversation around conservation. By day, Jon is the Vice President of Software at Apple, and he's been highly influential in the iPhone's camera app. He's also recently published a photo book called Patterns, where he explores his journey, his ideas, and his images to help again further that conversation about things that matter the most to him. It's a great episode. You are going to enjoy it. So let's get into it. And if you do like this, hit a like, do subscribe and tap that bell icon so YouTube notifies you when I next publish. This is Jon McCormack in the first episode of Them Frames That Make Us. Hello, Jon. Thanks very much for joining me.
Oh, so excited to be here. Thank you.
Excellent. So we're going to go through a few of your images. We're going to explore some of your older work, your personal work, and some new work that we can go through. And I want to start with the older image first, which is a landscape image. So yeah, I think we'll just start if you just tell us where this image was taken and kind of what it means to you.
Yeah, so this was the image that really, in some ways, changed the way I think about photography. So this image actually happened during the pandemic, and we all sort of remember back to that crazy time of the pandemic where life just kind of stopped, and as creatives, none of us knew what to do anymore. And so for me, the soul for that was I just started walking this local beach every afternoon, and just kind of out of habit, my camera came with me. There was no great on. And after a while, kind of decided to self-assign a project, giving me a bit of structure to photograph the same beach every night with the same camera, same lens for the duration of COVID. And so I sort of started off kind of like taking the more regular photographs, and then really got interested in these tiny little details, these details where they would only form for these moments in time where you had the light and the tide and the seagrass and the rocks come together to just create these little compositions. And this was the first really successful image out of that project. And it really did change the way that I thought about photography, because one of the things it did is it really made me slow down. That's like a 3-minute exposure or something like that to get that silky feel in the water. And really encouraged me to focus on, whenever I look at a scene, ask myself a question of what is really intriguing about this scene to me, which is sort of different from that question of like, well, what would other people think, or what should be popular, or like, what's cool. Just really sort of editing down in the field to just say, what is this photograph to me? And it was the start of this crazy journey that I then sort of ended up on this long-term project where I ended up in all 7 continents, looking for patterns in different places in nature.
I mean, it is a beautiful shot, and I want to ask because when we talk about the pandemic, I think a lot of us we want to move on from that time. I mean, a lot of my photography from that time, I tend not to look at just because it's so connected with the pandemic. But is this in a way kind of cathartic for you? Like, does it help you process that time that was horrible for the whole world in a more positive light because it was the birth of something so creative and that's obviously the building block for something that's been so meaningful for you.
So, yeah, I really have this strange relationship now with the pandemic because, like all of us, I remember a lot of it is just this horrible time where I was, yeah, afraid and lost and all of those things. But it also gave me this tremendous gift of being able to slow down with photography. Often, what would happen is I'd go down to the beach and I would set up a composition, and then other than checking my exposure every now and then, I wouldn't even be looking through the viewfinder of the camera. I'd be waiting for waves to show up the right pattern, and then trip the cable release. And the other thing it did is it took out that sort of frenetic sense of have to get the keeper today, because I must have gone back to that beach 200 times. And if you know that you're going to be back here tomorrow and there's no photographs today, then that's okay. So yeah, I look back at COVID and uh, remember all of this tremendous feel, this tremendous sort of weirdness, and then also have to, in some ways, be thankful for these giant gifts that it gave.
When you talk about slowing down
Yeah.
and this image kind of being the beginning of that shift from fast pace to slow pace, do you find this new pace and approach is allowing you to tell your stories better, to get your message out there better? Whereas sometimes if you're just taking the shot, you put out this beautiful picture, you're not really looking at what you're actually looking at, you're just seeing the beauty of it. Whereas by slowing down, you're able to take in the environment in a much more deeper way and then start that conversation around conservation, climate change, and things like that. As that slower pace allowed you to tell that message better.
Well, yes, because one of the things that it makes me do by slowing down is really consider what it is that I'm trying to say in an image. Because we've all gone to these amazing places. I live in California, and so I'll go up to somewhere like Yosemite, which is being photographed over and over and over again by photographers far more skilled than me. And so, but you show up in somewhere like the Yosemite Valley, and you look at Half Dome at sunset, and sure, take the photograph, but that photograph is not really saying anything other than I was here in this time and place. So it's almost like a postcard to yourself. But then for me, that practice of kind of looking deeper and saying, well, what is the thing that I am uniquely interested in about this particular space, this particular time, and this moment of light, and then really chasing that. And it's helped me clarify my voice to come down to this basic idea that as a visual communicator, the thing that I want to say is nature is a really extraordinary place. And if we just got out and spent a little bit of time looking more closely, we might all see that and we might care a little bit more about our planet. And so, yeah, it really has allowed me to refine who I am. And I no longer think about individual photographs. I think much more in terms of bodies of work. Like, what is this thing that I'm creating? And I think part of that is, sure, this will make me miss out on some photographs. Like, I'll go to a spot that everybody else has got a 24 millimeter wide angle lens, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm going to be wandering around with a super tele or a macro or something like that. So yeah, there are photographs that I'm not going to make that maybe I would have liked to, but I think what it does is it gives a cohesion to my work that I feel really good about.
Yeah, it's a beautiful photo.
Thank you.
It truly is beautiful. I'm going to shift to your personal image that you shared now, which is a different setting entirely. We've got people in
Mm.
this one, and yeah, just again, if you'd like to just share where this was taken and kind of why it's part of your selection of personal work that means a lot to you.
Yeah, so this was a grand misadventure. So in 1999, I was toying with the idea of dropping out of my tech career and becoming a full-time photographer, because what I've managed to do is I've managed to uh, keep together a career in tech and a fairly hectic photography practice. And that really was intentional for me right from the start, because I wanted to be able to self-assign. I wanted to be able to give myself freedom to go do projects. But I was in Silicon Valley in the late 90s, went through the tech boom and bubble bursting, and really did wonder to myself if I was just in the wrong place and sort of wasting my life. So I headed to Kenya wondering if the thing that I really should be doing with my life is becoming a big animal and wildlife photographer. And I get to Kenya and I ended up meeting this guy who was a waiter in a safari camp named Willie. And he and I got to talking. And one of the things that he said was that the great sorrow of his life was that his kids would never get to go to school. And I was like, well, Willie, what on earth? You make good money, you work in a safari camp, you get tips from Westerners. Like, what's the deal? And he's like, John, it's not about the money. Like, my house is 4 miles from the nearest school, and nobody can walk that far until they're 12 or 13 years old. And nobody wants to be the teenager in first grade. So my kids aren't going to get an education. And this unexpectedly created this journey to go start building schools in Western Kenya. So we've been doing this for 25 years, the and we now have got 6 schools and about 2,400 kids that we serve and put together a feeding program and a healthcare program and stuff like that. But it really gave me this interesting doorway into the Maasai culture, and it's one of those things that when people think about sort of going to a remote place to sort of take photographs of the people, often if you're sort of in and out, you don't really get to have a relationship with the people that you're photographing. So the thing that this photograph was like it was one of these markers of for me really being accepted by the community. And so this was after uh, probably 10 years of me going there a couple of times a year to sort of help keep the schools going along and stuff like that. And what's happening is these are all young Maasai men. They're called Moran, and they're sort of traditionally warrior class. And they will gather around in circle and they will sing, and it's just this beautiful kind of like deep sound, and the dress is sort of like they have been here for hundreds and hundreds of years. And indeed they have. The Maasai moved to Kenya about 500 years ago, and it just feels very ancient. And so they sort of let me into the circle, and then at some stage, um, I grab my camera and then I lay down on my back in the middle of the circle, looking up at them with a Profoto flash head in my hand, basically trying to sort of photograph on this thing and capture a moment of it. And what I really loved is as you see the two guys holding hands in the middle, one of them's actually holding a cell phone. And so it is this fantastic mix of the ancient, which is this old Maasai culture that sort of goes back in history, and the new culture of it was some like Nokia cell phone or something like that. And it just sort of for me it creates this interesting reminder of who I am on this journey with my Maasai friends, of somebody who comes alongside them to partner with them to help them build schools there where they get to respect who they are and what their history is, could also help them figure out their place in the modern world. So yeah, those are really interesting departure from wildlife photographer.
Yeah, yes. I mean, also, if I could just commend you for obviously in terms of the work you did with the schools, that's wonderful. It's a privilege we have in certain parts of the world which we take for granted. So the fact that children can get an education, and you're contributing to that is wonderful. I do just want to touch on something that you said, because community in that part of the world is runs very deep. It's very strong, and building trust, it takes time. And it's kind of poetic in the way that you said that for this image, they allowed you into the circle.
Yeah.
And it's kind of saying, we welcome you, we trust you, Jon. And I'm just wondering, what does that feel like for you to gain that trust and to be allowed to document them authentically, rather than just, a Westerner who's jumping in for a 5-day safari, seeing whatever images he can get, and see if he sees any locals, and then just jumping back out and never returning. What having that trust that you've gained over a period of time, how does that feel as a person and as a photographer?
Yeah, it's something that, like, obviously it feels good to be sort of trusted and welcomed in, and with it comes this sense of responsibility. Like, I'll sort of contrast this to when I first started working in tech. It was in the early '90s, and of course, tech then was all about sort of uh, moving as much of tech as you could to India, and doing a lot of kind of tech outsourced to India. And so I did what any sort of aspiring photographer would do that had time in India. I went and got myself an 85 1.4 lens, and I got myself 16 to 35, and basically went around harassing Indian people with a camera. And I look back on those photos today, and I'm actually pretty embarrassed by them because, with a couple of exceptions, I can't remember, or I didn't even know the name or the story of any single person that I was taking a photograph of. It's that question, like, what am I doing here? I'm turning these people's lives into sort of cheap souvenirs that basically might, like, sit on social media or something like that. But then again, realizing this, and I think it does echo a little bit the story of the last image, where it took me from one kind of photographer to another. This journey did, where instead of, like, wandering around looking for photographs, it became this question of, well, what is the story that I'm trying to tell here? And so then there is this level of uh, trust, I think, an obligation that says, if I'm going to bother these folks and photograph them and sort of, at some level, interrupt what they're doing, because it's pretty unusual to have this 6'3" white giant at the bottom of a circle with a camera and a flash. Um, where do these images go, and what are these images for? And some of the images are just like lots of family portraits and stuff like that. I'm pretty religious about, when I take a photograph of somebody, that I'll get a print of it and I'll send it back to them somewhere. So, like, lots of family photos taken by me, sort of scattered all over the Transmara region of Western Kenya. But it's that deeper obligation of, how do I help these folks tell and preserve their story? And it led me to doing things like, there's this one family that I know that, in one living community, so going from the grandfather to the kids to the grandkids, goes from somebody who grew up, grandfather Jackson grew up fully nomadic, and uh, never lived in a sort of what we would think of as a regular house until sometime in his 60s. Then you go the next generation down. One of them grew up fully nomadic. The other, and then you go down from there. There's got one guy's got a master's in education, another is a chef, another is a world-class runner, and then you go to the next level down, the sort of the grandchildren, and they're kids that are going to grow up and go to college and have professional jobs. And so I got to spend a lot of time with this family, just sort of like documenting their story, because these little snapshots of history just aren't gonna be around for that long. And so it's this real, privilege, and I think obligation, that now that I've built these relationships, to then ask the question of, well, how can my images serve the history of this community?
Before we jump onto the final image, I just want to say what I really like about this shot is the angle that it's done. And this might not have been by intention, but like you say, 6'5" white guy coming in from California, and I've done the same thing in kind of, although I'm not 6'5", but I've done the same thing when I've gone to places like India, and I've made people just a spectacle, a souvenir. I've been guilty of that myself. But what I like about this shot is because you're low down, kind of looking up at them, like you're keeping their power in the frame. You're kind of submissive in a way. You're like, I'll come down here and get out of the way, and you can hold your power. And I think that's just wonderfully
Yeah, and
portrayed in this image.
I would love to say that I was conscious of that. It was mostly from a compositional perspective that was just getting it down in the circle. But yeah, it is an image that I think portrays these young men as who they are, these powerful, thoughtful, uh, warriors, and they're not sort of warriors in the traditional sense of they're going to go out and kill lions and stuff like that. They're warriors in terms of they're the generation that they and their sisters are going to take the Messiah forward into the world.
Excellent. Okay, and now the final image that we're going to share is a new image, which is again completely different. I am loving the diversity in the selection. Um, it's weird. I see two eyes and a nose in this image, but of course this is not an animal, I imagine. So
Yeah,
yeah, if you could just give some indication.
it actually is an animal. And
Is it really?
but it's the back of a rainbow scarab from continental US. And so
Okay.
the this the way this image came about is
Wow.
I did this long-term book project that took me forever, and launched the book, got a bunch of press on it and stuff like that, and book is doing really well. And then there's this obvious question of like, well, where do I go from here? And because it is this kind of weird feeling, like as photographers, like finish a project, and then there's that fear and uncertainty of like, is that the last good work that I'm ever going to do? And now, like, sort of, I like did that work, and now I'm completely lost. And so I actually I lost my way a little bit in terms of trying to figure out what was next, because like I'd sort of like finished one kind of cohesive body of work, and then the question was sort of where to go next. And um, it occurred to me that the way to think about the book and all the press and stuff like that wasn't as, oh, it's this like giant like achievement, yay me. It was just recognition of the work that I'd been doing for the last decade was actually good work. That the reason the book happened and the reason Nat Geo happened and the reason all those other things happened was because for a decade I've been consciously off doing good work. And then this was just a reflection of that. And so then the clear answer was, well, okay, John, get your cameras back out and go do good work again. And the thing that happened is I was in New York and ended up in the Natural History Museum and was walking through the bug section of the Natural History Museum, and they had all of these beetles, including scarab beetles. And thing that really struck me was the designs in some of these beetles were just fantastic. And so um, I was like, okay, well, what do I do with this? And so thankfully, the internet allows you to go and like source beetles and things like that. And so then it's like sort of like beetles start arriving at my house, and and then it's this question of how do I like one find a pattern that is interesting, but then I'm shooting through a 5 times or 10 times macro lens. All of these images are focus stacked, so they're probably 100 individual images taken at different focal planes, and then also like all stacked together. But it also has to be studio lit because I've no interest in just taking a documentary photograph of a of the back of an animal saying, like, sort of like, see, here's like, yeah, here's what the back of the animal looks like. I'm more interested in taking that and then lighting it as like a studio photographer and sort of presenting that as my interpretation of what this sort of this natural part is. And so then, that whole cross section is probably a quarter of an inch or something like that. And so then it's this crazy world of like sort of how do you try and studio like something that's sort of, a quarter of an inch by 3/8 of an inch type thing. And it's this whole crazy world that is opened up to me. It's driving my family completely crazy because, there are lights, there are macro rigs. It's like, like you sort of walk into my office and it just like, it looks like the, B&H photo department just like exploded all over my floor. But that's the price of me getting into something new.
What I love about this photo is I think it's one of the best to put the viewer in the shoes of the photographer, and just going back to the theme of slowing down, looking more closely. That's exactly what this image makes the viewer do, because at first I'm seeing eyes, and in yeah, I know it's not actual eyes, but I
Mhm.
just in the top part of the image.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, what exactly am I looking at? And then I'm looking at the different colors, I'm looking at the gradient of the colors, I'm looking at the patterns, I'm questioning, and all of a sudden I'm slowed down. I'm not just
Mhm.
shifting from one image to the next. And I think that's great. And I think there's a coherent theme, although these images are very different in different environments and different settings. There's a coherent theme where I feel through your work is what you're saying is that if we slow down and look close enough at wildlife, at nature, at humanity, there's so much to admire and appreciate and feel inspired from. And I think that's essential in the current time
Well,
where we are being fed constant things.
and here's the other crazy thing that the and I'm somebody who, as you can probably tell from the whole kind of macro bug thing, goes deeply down rabbit holes. And I listened to some podcast at some stage about how uh, about the neuroscience of patterns, like as we engage with patterns, what happens. And it turns out that uh, our visual systems use patterns to regulate the idea of like if there is structure if there's structure in our surroundings that fundamentally makes us like like feel a little bit better, but natural patterns are actually very different to sort of human built patterns because human built patterns tend to be very regular, like so like buildings, walls are really straight, etc., etc. Whereas natural patterns, they repeat, so they do give us that sense of security, but they also don't repeat exactly. There's always variation. Think of branches and waves, fractals, stuff like that. And what this does is it actually keeps us engaged. And so when you stare at natural patterns, whether they're out in nature or even just kind of a photograph on a screen or a print, your body actually starts to deregulate, and the stress emotions start to go down, and you can even it even starts to activate your reward system. So we actually get a dopamine hit in a really positive way from looking at patterns. And yeah, I think that there is a lot of very easily accessible antidotes to the current stress of today's pace of life by just being around nature. And the other thing that I was very careful to do in the book is, yeah, sure, I went to the ends of the earth and ice caves in the Arctic and stuff like that to make photographs, but I also made photographs in my backyard of hibiscus flowers and things like that. Just this idea of nature and the patterns of nature, and therefore the effect of the patterns of nature can have on us as humans from a just uh, addressing mental fatigue and stuff like that. All of this is actually readily available to us. And it was some another unintended learning of this project. There's this whole body of science around what nature's patterns can do for us.
And that's wonderful. Now, before I let you go,
Yeah.
like you say, you do have a book,
Mhm.
speaking of patterns. And yeah, if you could just let people know exactly what they can expect from the book, where they can get it. And yeah,
Yeah, so the book is called Patterns. I probably have one longer. Yes, how about that? So book looks like that, and it's the reflection of the images in the book go back about 30 years, and most of them are taken. Two-thirds of the images are taken within the last 6 years, but really what it is, it's a concentration on finding interesting patterns in the world and going and looking for things that sometimes are accessible to folks, sometimes that are inaccessible to folks, and documenting those patterns, but documenting them as art and just bringing them back to a book that people can just really engage with. It was very important to me that I wasn't creating a fancy fine art book. I wasn't creating sort of a science textbook. I wanted to build something that folks could just engage with nature on, and it's a very contemplative book in terms of you can go through every page. One of the key design elements was uh, every time you turn a page, getting some notion of surprise where you're going from image one to image two. That there's always a little bit of a gift waiting where you go like, "Huh, I didn't see that coming," but I can understand how you got there. And so, really, the whole idea of the book is just a continuation of that theme of let's slow down and let's look at nature in new and fresh ways, and let's just let that nature wash over us. In terms of where to get it, all of the regular places. Amazon, obviously, Waterstones in the UK, bookstores. The publisher is Damiani out of Bologna, who are fantastic and available from them as well. So, yeah, it's been a crazy adventure. Quite wonderful.
excellent. Congratulations. It's an awesome book. I've been able to see it. It's an excellent book. I
Okay.
recommend people definitely go check it out. I will leave a link down in the description so people can go purchase it, because it's yeah, it's excellent work, and I appreciate you taking the time, John, to go through the images and have this conversation with me.
This was super fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Excellent.
Cool.
You take care.
Okay, ciao.
Guys, I really hope you enjoyed that first episode. I'll be back again with the next episode with Phil Penman. If you did like it, do tap a like, do subscribe, and tap that bell icon so YouTube notifies you when I next publish. This was Them Frames That Make Us. I'm Dan. Until the next one, see ya.